The Duchess of Richmond's ballroom was a glittering, suffocating trap. For Miss Millicent Thornhill, it was the final, agonising night of her 4th London season. At 22, she was not yet a spinster, but the title felt stitched onto the silk of her gown. She sat, as she had for 4 years, on the edge of a gilded settee, a permanent fixture against the wall, a wallflower. She was perfectly pretty, with soft brown hair and intelligent grey eyes, but she lacked the dazzling quality, the substantial dowry, and the aggressive social manoeuvring required to succeed in the marriage market. Tonight, she had resolved, would be her last attempt. Millicent watched her younger, prettier sisters, who would debut next year, flirt with effortless ease. A pang of resignation, not jealousy, settled in her chest. She was tired of the hope, the disappointment, and the silent judgment. As the orchestra struck up a new set, Millicent prepared to slip away unnoticed, but a voice, sharp and carrying, stopped her. "Poor Miss Thornhill," Lady Cowper, the season's most influential matron, confided loudly to a companion nearby. 4 years, my dear. 4 years of warming the wall. At this point, she should simply give up the ghost and apply to be a companion to some elderly aunt. It would be kinder than allowing her to continue as a permanent fixture. She is a wall decoration, nothing more. The words, though not directed to her, struck Millicent with the force of a physical blow. Her cheeks burned. It was the truth, brutally stated. She was invisible, a failure. She lowered her head, focusing on the intricate pattern of her fan, praying for the floor to swallow her whole. The pain was not new, but the finality of the statement was devastating. She had been reduced to a piece of furniture, and the knowledge solidified her decision. She would leave London tomorrow and never return. Raphael Alistair, the Marquess of Blackwood, stood by the French doors, a solitary, imposing figure whose presence commanded silence rather than conversation. His reputation preceded him. Cold, reclusive, and utterly indifferent to the social machinations of the ton. He was the most feared man in the room, not for cruelty, but for his profound disinterest. He attended these events only out of obligation to his title, a duty he fulfilled with grim detachment. He had observed Miss Thornhill for the better part of the evening, not with the predatory gaze of a rake, but with the quiet intensity of a fellow exile. He had seen the precise moment Lady Cowper's cruel words found their mark. He watched the subtle slump of Millicent's shoulders, the way she clutched her fan, and the profound, wounded dignity in her stillness. She did not cry. She did not react. She simply absorbed the blow, a testament to years of silent suffering. Raphael knew that look. It was the look of a soul bruised by superficiality, a mind too intelligent for the vapid conversations that surrounded them. He was drawn to her not by beauty, but by her palpable honesty and her shared solitude. In a room full of masks, Millicent wore her hurt openly, and it was the most genuine thing he had seen all night. An unexpected, fierce impulse seized him, a desire to shatter that isolation, to offer a moment of validation to a person who clearly deserved it. It was rash, reckless, and entirely unlike the Marquess of Blackwood. He straightened his coat, his dark eyes fixed on the wallflower. He would not allow her last night in London to end in such quiet humiliation. Millicent finally gathered the strength to rise, intending to make her quiet exit. She took 2 steps toward the door, her heart heavy with the certainty of her failure. Just as she reached the periphery of the crowd, a shadow fell over her. She looked up, startled, into the intense, dark eyes of the Marquess of Blackwood. Raphael Alistair was taller than she had imagined, his expression unreadable, his presence radiating a controlled power that made the surrounding noise seem to fade. He was the most eligible, the most feared and the least approachable man in the entire ton. Millicent was certain he had mistaken her for someone else. He leaned down, his voice a low, resonant whisper that barely carried over the music, yet felt deafeningly loud to her. "Miss Thornhill," he murmured, his gaze locking onto hers. "I believe this waltz is ours. Will you dance with me?" The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The music seemed to stop, though it continued to play. Conversations died abruptly. A collective, audible gasp rippled through the nearest circle of guests. Lady Cowper's jaw dropped in undisguised astonishment. The Marquess of Blackwood, who had not danced in years, who despised the entire ritual, was asking the invisible Miss Thornhill to dance. Millicent's mind went blank. She could only stare at the hand he offered, a strong, elegant hand gloved in white. It was a gesture of defiance, a public validation, and a challenge to the entire room. She placed her trembling hand in his. "Yes, my Lord Marquess," she managed, her voice barely a breath. Raphael led her onto the floor with a surprising gentleness. His hand, resting lightly on the small of her back, was warm and steady. As they began to move, the initial shock of the guests gave way to intense, focused scrutiny. Millicent felt every eye in the room upon them, but the Marquess seemed utterly oblivious. He danced with a precise, almost formal grace, guiding her through the steps with an ease that belied his reputation. They did not speak for the first full minute. Millicent, overwhelmed, found herself studying his profile. His features were sharp, handsome, and etched with a melancholy that softened the harshness of his reputation. She noticed the slight tension around his eyes, the subtle weariness. He was not merely cold, he was burdened. Finally, he spoke, his voice still low, meant only for her. "I apologize for the suddenness, Miss Thornhill. I fear I'm not practiced in the delicate art of the invitation." Millicent managed a small, genuine smile. "It was unexpected, my lord, but a welcome surprise." "Unexpected," he repeated, a faint, almost imperceptible curve touching his lips. "I find that I prefer the unexpected. The predictable is so dreadfully tedious." He paused, his gaze searching hers. "You, Miss Thornhill, are not tedious." In that moment, she understood. He had seen her, not the wallflower, not the failure, but the person underneath. It was a connection of two solitary souls, recognizing a shared exile in a room full of people. The dance was not a courtship. It was a silent, profound acknowledgement. The waltz concluded. Raphael brought Millicent back to the edge of the ballroom. For a terrifying moment, she thought he might offer his arm, perhaps even introduce her to someone. But the moment passed. He simply bowed, a deep, formal gesture. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Thornhill." It was necessary. Before Millicent could formulate a reply, he turned on his heel and disappeared into the crowd, melting back toward the French doors, with the same swift, silent efficiency with which he had appeared. He was gone. The entire interaction had lasted less than 5 minutes. Millicent stood alone, the centre of a sudden, swirling vortex of speculation. The silence that had fallen during their dance was replaced by a furious, buzzing clamour. Ladies whispered behind their fans, gentlemen stared, and Lady Cowper looked as though she might faint. The attention was suffocating. Millicent, her heart still pounding from the dance and the shock, could not bear the sudden, intense visibility. She felt exposed, not validated. She dropped a quick, almost panicked curtsy to the nearest matron and fled the ballroom. She did not stop until she reached the relative sanctuary of her carriage, her mind reeling. Had it been a joke? A moment of eccentricity? Or had the feared Marquess truly seen her? Regardless, her anonymity was gone, replaced by a notoriety she had never sought. she knew one thing for certain: the season and her life would never be the same. The following morning, the Thornhill household was in chaos. The Morning Post carried a breathless front-page account of the Marquess of Blackwood's unprecedented appearance on the dance floor with the hitherto overlooked Miss Thornhill. Millicent, still in her dressing gown, was summoned to her father's study. The Baron Thornhill, a man whose primary concern was the state of his ledgers, was ecstatic. "Millicent, my dear girl, the Marquess, Blackwood, his lands border the Crown's own forests. This is a miracle. You must encourage him." Millicent, however, was wary. "Father, he merely asked me for a single dance." He said nothing more. As if to contradict her, a footman entered, bearing a magnificent bouquet of white roses and a sealed, crested note. The flowers were from Blackwood. The note was brief, formal, and to the point, an invitation to call upon her that afternoon. Before Millicent could process the invitation, the door burst open. Lord Ashworth, a wealthy, older gentleman who had been pursuing Millicent with dull persistence, entered uninvited. His face was a mask of furious jealousy. "Miss Thornhill, you cannot possibly entertain that man. He is a recluse, a cold fish. I assure you, my intentions are far more honourable and stable." The Baron immediately intervened, eager to placate the richer, more certain prospect. Millicent watched the two men argue over her as if she were a piece of property. The Marquess's pursuit, though thrilling, had instantly created a complicated, dangerous situation. She now faced not only the judgment of society, but the open hostility of a jealous rival and the relentless pressure of her family. She knew she had to meet Raphael again, if only to understand the true nature of his necessary dance. Millicent, determined to understand Raphael's intentions beyond the social spectacle, agreed to meet him, but on her own terms. She suggested Hatchard's bookshop, a neutral territory, far from the gossiping eyes of Mayfair drawing rooms. He arrived precisely on time, his presence still commanding, but softened by the scent of old paper and leather. "Miss Thornhill," he greeted her, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. "I confess I have not been in a bookshop in years." I had forgotten the quiet. "It is the only place in London where one can be truly alone, even when surrounded by others," Millicent replied, feeling an immediate ease she had never expected with the feared Marquess. Their conversation quickly moved beyond polite society. They discussed history, philosophy, and poetry. Millicent discovered that Raphael was a scholar, a man who devoured books on architecture and ancient languages, a world away from the superficiality of the season. Raphael, in turn, was fascinated by her sharp wit and her deep, quiet passion for literature. He saw that her timidity was not a lack of spirit, but a defence mechanism. "You read me, Millicent," he said, using her Christian name for the first time, his voice low. "You see the man, not the title." "Why?" "Because I know what it is to be misjudged, my lord," she admitted, her gaze steady. "I am judged for what I lack. You are judged for what you possess, but the result is the same. Solitude." Raphael nodded slowly, a profound understanding passing between them. The connection was intellectual, emotional, and far more binding than any ballroom dance. He found himself wanting to share his world with her, a desire he had suppressed for years. Raphael, emboldened by their shared intellectual intimacy, invited Millicent for a private ride in Hyde Park, away from the crowded paths. During the ride, the conversation turned to his estate, Blackwood Manor, and the vast empty rooms that awaited him. "I find," he confessed, his eyes distant, fixed on the horizon, "that the silence there is often too loud. It reminds me of what I lost." Millicent waited patiently, offering no platitudes. He finally revealed the source of his profound isolation, the carriage accident that had claimed his young fiancée, Lady Eleanor, and his sister, Lady Clara. "I was meant to be with them," he said, his voice rough with old guilt. "I delayed my journey. If I had been there, perhaps I could have done something." "You were not there, Raphael," Millicent corrected gently, using his name naturally. "And you cannot carry the weight of what was not your fault. Grief is a burden, but guilt is a cage you build for yourself." Her simple, honest assessment struck him deeply. No one had ever dared to speak to him with such frankness or such empathy. She saw his vulnerability and did not recoil. She did not pity him. She understood him. For the first time since the tragedy, Raphael felt a crack in the icy fortress he had built around his heart. He realized that Millicent was not just an escape from the superficiality of the ton. She was a potential anchor in his turbulent emotional sea. The growing attention from the Marquess of Blackwood did not go unnoticed, and the society's reaction was swift and venomous. Millicent found herself the subject of intense scrutiny, and not all of it was kind. At a small afternoon tea, Lady Cowper cornered her, her smile saccharine but her eyes sharp. "My dear Miss Thornhill," Lady Cowper purred, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "we are all delighted that the Marquess has finally decided to amuse himself. But you must be careful. Lord Blackwood is not a man to be trifled with. He is cold, you know, and his interest in you is merely a diversion. He has a reputation for being difficult." Another matron chimed in, "Indeed, he is still mourning his poor Eleanor. He will never truly marry. And if he does, it will be for a powerful political alliance, not for a sweet, overlooked girl like you. Do not mistake his attention for affection, dear. It will only lead to heartbreak." Millicent felt the familiar sting of their words, but this time they did not crush her. She had Raphael's words, his shared secrets to protect her. "Lady Cowper," Millicent replied, her voice steady and calm, a new strength in her posture, "I am aware of the Marquess's reputation. I assure you, I am a very good judge of character, and I find him to be a man of profound honour, perhaps the only one in this room." The bold retort shocked the matrons into silence, but Millicent knew she had only intensified the external conflict. Her association with Raphael was now a declaration of war against the established social order. The external pressure reached a breaking point when Lord Ashworth, fueled by jealousy and the fear of losing Millicent to a superior rival, acted decisively. He made a formal proposal to the Baron Thornhill, offering a substantial settlement and promising to clear the Baron's outstanding debts. The Baron, overjoyed by the financial security, immediately accepted without consulting Millicent. He cornered her in the drawing room, his face flushed with excitement. "Millicent, you have saved us. Lord Ashworth has offered for you. We are secured. You must accept him immediately. This nonsense with the Marquess must stop. Ashworth is a certainty, a good, solid match. Blackwood is a phantom, a risk we cannot afford to take." Millicent felt a wave of nausea. "Father, I cannot marry Lord Ashworth. I do not love him. I barely tolerate his company." "Love," the Baron scoffed. "Love is for poets, Millicent, not for daughters who must secure their family's future. You will accept, or I will be forced to forbid you from seeing the Marquess again. I will not allow you to jeopardize your sister's future for a romantic folly." The ultimatum was clear. Millicent was trapped. She had 2 days to give her answer. The pressure to sacrifice her own happiness for her family's financial stability was immense, and the Baron's threat to cut off her only source of genuine connection Raphael, was devastating. Raphael, sensing Millicent's sudden withdrawal, called upon her the next afternoon. He found her pale and distraught, pacing the garden path. "Millicent, what is wrong?" he demanded, his usual reserve shattered by genuine concern. She burst into tears, the accumulated stress of the past few days overwhelming her. She confessed everything: the proposal, the debt, her father's ultimatum, and the fear that she was about to lose the only man who had ever truly seen her. Raphael listened, his expression hardening with every word. "He cannot force you. I will speak to him. I will offer a counter-settlement." "No, Raphael," she insisted, wiping her eyes. "You cannot buy me. I will not be traded like a horse. Besides, he will only see it as a game of wills, and he will use me to spite you." He stepped closer, his hands reaching out to cup her face. "Then tell me what you want, Millicent. Tell me you want me." The intensity in his dark eyes was overwhelming. She had never seen him so unguarded, so raw. He was no longer the feared Marquess. He was simply Raphael, a man fighting for his soulmate. "I do," she whispered, the admission tearing from her heart. "I want you, Raphael." He closed the distance, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was both desperate and tender. It was a declaration, a promise, and a moment of pure, unadulterated connection. The kiss sealed their attraction, but it also cemented Millicent's fear. She was in love with a man who was emotionally unavailable, and whose pursuit had placed her in an impossible position. The very next day, Millicent's world crumbled. She was at a milliner's shop when she overheard a conversation between two ladies. "Did you hear? The Marquess of Blackwood is to be married." Millicent's heart plummeted. She froze, clutching a bolt of silk. "Yes, to the Duchess of Abernathy's daughter, Lady Sophia. They say the Duchess has been arranging the match for years. A perfect political alliance. It was only a matter of time before he tired of that little Miss Thornhill." Millicent's mind immediately supplied the necessary logic. The Duchess of Abernathy was a long-time friend of Raphael's family. Millicent had seen Raphael speaking intensely with the Duchess at a ball just 2 nights ago. He had been distant, formal, and the conversation had seemed serious. "He is cold, you know. He will never truly marry for love." The words of Lady Cowper echoed in her mind. The kiss, the shared secrets, the empathy, it had all been a diversion, a cruel game played by a man who was incapable of true emotion. He had found his anchor, and it was not her. Millicent's deep-seated insecurity, the fear of being perpetually overlooked and replaced, resurfaced with devastating force. She felt foolish, humiliated, and utterly betrayed. She was not the exception. She was merely a brief, amusing interlude. Convinced that Raphael had used her to amuse himself before settling into a politically advantageous marriage, Millicent made her decision. She would accept Lord Ashworth's proposal. It was a loveless match, but it offered security, and, more importantly, it offered an end to the heartache and the constant pressure. She wrote a brief, formal note to Raphael, declining any further calls, and another to her father, accepting Ashworth's offer. Then, before either man could respond, she packed a small trunk and, under the pretence of visiting a sick aunt, fled London for the Thornhill family's small, dilapidated country estate in Kent. She arrived at the quiet, isolated manor, seeking refuge and the peace to mourn the brief, intense connection she had shared with Raphael. She would marry Ashworth, become a respectable, if unhappy, wife, and finally free her family from their financial burdens. The wallflower had been plucked, only to be tossed aside. She would now resign herself to her fate. Raphael, receiving Millicent's curt note, was instantly alarmed. He went immediately to the Thornhill residence, only to be met by the smug, victorious face of the Baron. "Ah, Marquess," the Baron said, bowing with false deference. "Too late, I fear. Millicent has accepted Lord Ashworth's proposal and has retired to the country to prepare for the wedding. She has made the sensible choice." Raphael's face was a mask of cold fury. "She accepted Ashworth? That is a lie. She loves me." "Love is irrelevant, my lord," the Baron sneered. "Ashworth offered to clear my debts. You offered only flowers and poetry. She chose security. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a wedding to plan." Raphael realised the depth of the Baron's manipulation and the immense pressure Millicent had been under. He also realised the source of the misunderstanding, the rumour of his engagement. The Duchess of Abernathy, Lady Sophia's mother, was indeed helping him, but not to arrange a marriage. She was helping him secretly purchase and renovate a small, charming estate near Blackwood Manor, a wedding gift he intended to present to Millicent. The rumour had been a deliberate, cruel misinterpretation. He felt a surge of panic and determination. He had allowed his past trauma to make him too cautious, too slow. He had failed to protect her from the social wolves and the avarice of her own father. He would not fail her now. He ordered his fastest carriage and, without a word to anyone, set off for Kent, determined to confront Millicent and claim the woman who had finally broken through his isolation. Raphael arrived at the dilapidated Thornhill country estate in a cloud of dust and fury. He found Millicent in the small dusty library, surrounded by the only friends she had ever truly trusted, her books. She looked up startled, her face pale with shock at his unexpected dramatic entrance. "Raphael, what are you doing here? You should not have come." He closed the door firmly, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and desperate love. "I came to stop you from making the greatest mistake of your life. I came to stop you from marrying Ashworth." "I have no choice," she cried, tears welling up. "I heard the rumours, Raphael. I know you are to marry Lady Sophia for an alliance. I will not be your mistress, nor your brief amusement. I will not be invisible any more. Lady Sophia is my cousin's wife's sister, and she has been helping me," he said, his voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "She has been helping me prepare a small, charming estate near Blackwood Manor. A wedding gift, Millicent, because I was going to ask you to marry me, but I was too slow, too cautious, too afraid of my own feelings to move quickly enough to protect you from your father." He took a step closer, disarming her with his raw honesty. "The only reason I was seen with her was to discuss the renovations. I was trying to build you a home, Millicent, a sanctuary where you would never be a wallflower again. I was trying to prove I was worthy of you, and in doing so, I nearly lost you." Millicent stared, the truth of his words shattering her carefully constructed resignation. He had not been betraying her. He had been preparing for her. Raphael took her hands, his touch warm and steady. He looked into her eyes, no longer the feared Marquess, but a man stripped bare of his defences. "Millicent, I have spent 4 years in the shadow of my past, believing I was incapable of love, incapable of protection. Then I saw you, sitting alone, absorbing the cruelty of the world with such quiet dignity. You are not a wallflower, you are a fortress of quiet strength. You saw the man beneath the title, the pain beneath the coldness, and you offered me empathy without pity. You are the only person who has ever made the silence in my life bearable." He dropped to one knee, a gesture that was both formal and deeply personal. "I do not offer you a life of social prominence, though you will have it. I offer you a life of quiet companionship, of shared books, of intellectual honesty, and of unwavering devotion." I promise you, Millicent, that you will never be invisible again. I will see you every day for the rest of my life. Will you do me the honour of becoming my Marchioness and my dearest friend?" Millicent's heart swelled with a joy so profound, it was almost painful. He had seen her, truly seen her, and offered her not just a title, but a partnership. "Yes, Raphael," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." He rose and kissed her, a kiss that was no longer desperate, but filled with the quiet certainty of a shared future. The newly engaged couple returned to London, where the news of their impending marriage caused an even greater sensation than their dance. Raphael, however, handled the social fallout with a protective fury. At the next major social event, Millicent, radiant and standing proudly on Raphael's arm, was confronted by Lady Cowper, who attempted to offer a patronising congratulation. "My dear Millicent," Lady Cowper began, her voice dripping with false sincerity, "it is a miracle, truly. But you must be careful. The Marquess is so volatile." Raphael stepped forward, his expression cold enough to freeze the champagne. "Lady Cowper," he said, his voice cutting through the ballroom noise, "my Marchioness-to-be is not volatile. She is the most intelligent and honourable woman I have ever known. And, I assure you, any further comment, kind or otherwise, regarding my wife's character or our courtship will be taken as a direct insult to my family. Is that clear?" Lady Cowper, utterly cowed by the sheer force of his aristocratic authority, stammered an apology and retreated. Later that evening, Lord Ashworth attempted to approach Millicent. Raphael simply placed a possessive hand on Millicent's waist and glared at the man until he turned away, defeated. Millicent realised that Raphael's fear was not a flaw. It was a shield he wielded for those he loved. She was no longer the invisible wallflower. She was the most protected woman in the ton. 6 months later, Millicent and Raphael were married in a quiet, elegant ceremony at Blackwood Manor. The small estate Raphael had purchased for her, now fully renovated, became their private sanctuary, a place where they could retreat from the demands of the world. Millicent, now the Marchioness of Blackwood, found her true self. She hosted small, intimate gatherings where intellectual conversation was prized over gossip. She was no longer timid. She was simply selective. One quiet evening, a year into their marriage, Millicent sat in the library at Blackwood Manor, Raphael reading beside her. She closed her book and looked at him, her heart full. "Raphael," she said softly, "do you ever regret that dance? That moment of madness?" He lowered his book and smiled, a genuine, warm expression that always made her heart flutter. "Regret it? Millicent, that dance was the only sane decision I've ever made. You were sitting there, waiting to be seen, and I was standing there, waiting to be saved. You are my anchor, my dearest friend, and my magnificent Marchioness." He reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips. The Marquess of Blackwood, once the most feared and solitary man in England, was now merely Raphael, a man utterly devoted to the woman who had once been the invisible wallflower. Their love story, born of a single shocking dance, was a testament to the truth that sometimes the greatest love is found not in the spotlight, but in the quiet, shared recognition of two souls who were simply tired of sitting alone.